We are bringing the perspectives together, as I already said, and then now I would like to join all of you to think about it, but also to participate in a way in a chat, in a conversation about how policy, technology, and business all come together to contribute to the Open RAN system. And it's a special, distinguished pleasure for me to welcome on stage Philippe Gröschl, Director Government Relations of Telefónica Germany. Welcome, Philippe. And of course, Kim and Andreas, please come back on stage. Very much looking forward to this session and the policy.
Okay, welcome again. Thank you very much for joining this little session. Now we want to build a little bit of a bridge between, I would say, technological aspects of Open RAN to policy, because the next speaker we will receive or will see here on the stage is Thomas Jatzombeck, the State Secretary of the German Federal Ministry of Digital Affairs, and we will receive a short keynote from him. And therefore, I think it's a good point of time to building a bridge between this technological discussion and what this means from a policy perspective. But before we start with this short discussion, I just want to introduce you to the round. So Maja, you have already introduced yourself in a very smart way. So I can make it short, I think. You're looking back on 20 years, on a 20 years career in the automotive, consulting and telecommunication sector. And since this year, you are the CEO of the Open RAN Alliance.
Yes, thank you.
And you studied business administrations and physical educations, which is sports science. And I asked you, why have you studied this nice combination? And you said, what I think it's very nice, it's a good combination of having an active mind and an active body. So this also stands, I think, a little bit for your mindset. I would assume that it is like this.
Yes, thank you.
So welcome again. Then I also want to reintroduce Kim. So you are looking back even on a, I would say, 24 years or even more than 24 years career in the telecommunication sectors. You have studied physics and mathematics, also made a PhD in mathematics, I think, physics. And you worked in a lot of different leadership roles in the telecommunications business, especially at Deutsche Telekom. Have been, for example, CTIO in different operating businesses of Deutsche Telekom all over Europe. So you're looking back on a very, very long career of leading technological organizations. And
I was young when I started.
Yeah.
Really?
And now you join here our conversation with a lot of experience, which is also very nice. And another very experienced person is Andreas Gladisch, who also is very long in the telecommunications sector and studied communication studies, studied telecommunication technologies here in Berlin, I think. And currently you're in the role of the Vice President Emerging Technologies at Deutsche Telekom. And you are also leading the consortium of i14y. So you can say you are one of the parents of and facilitators of i14y. Very happy to have you here on stage.
Yeah, thank you.
And last but not least, I also want to introduce myself. I'm the youngster here because I'm only since about 10 years in the telecommunications sector. And I studied law, not technological things, so more like you, more the non-techie things. And I am currently leading the policy team of Telefónica Germany as Director Government Relations. So let's talk a little bit about the political or policy aspect of Open RAN. I want to start with a short question to Maja. So you already introduced a little bit the idea of the future of Open RAN, how it should be developed to also meet the needs of the market, the need of the vendors and things like this. But what do you think, where do we currently stand in Europe in terms of development of implementation of Open RAN? Is the ecosystem and all we have done in Europe so far, is it enough to really kick off and scale Open RAN? Or what is your assessment about the current situation we have here in Europe?
Okay, well, thank you for raising your question. Well, first of all, we have been here, like, we started, and Etsy actually started to adapting our specifications into standards. And now it's actually approached throughout the world, in North America, Korea. We are also going to the Indian Mobile Congress and speaking there about it. But in Europe, I would say we are on a okay track. Yeah. So there's accelerating expected over the next 2 years by Deutsche Telekom, for example, 3,000 sites. You might know the numbers much better than I do. Vodafone is actually announcing that it's aiming 30% plus of their European sites, and they have also a good footprint over Europe. In Asia, it's Rakuten and NTT. So it's on a good way. I wouldn't say it's great. As we've mentioned before, it's probably more on a plateau, and certainly there's room for fantasy and for more.
Okay, thank you very much. This also covers my personal impression, and I think what is, from a policy perspective, always a challenge is that we have a very fragmented policy framework here in Europe. This means that different European member states are doing different things, different funding schemes, different research policies, and this makes it also sometimes not so easy from a company perspective also to participate in all these things, because so many different things are happening in Europe at the same time, but they are not always perfectly integrated or connected with each other. So this is also a challenge from my perspective I just wanted to add. But now, because it's not about my perspective, it's about your perspective. Therefore, I also want to integrate Kim now in this little conversation and want to ask you whether you see also specific risks when policymakers intervene into network architectures, imposing requirements for the infrastructure, like, for example, diversity and things like this, from a more, I would say, policy way of thinking. And whether do you think that could also be a risk for the industry and for the development of the technology? And do you think that it is really necessary to have an active role of policymakers in this discussion?
Wow, well, I think 3 questions. But my very easy answer is I don't see a risk. I think policymakers, politicians must provide guardrails for the industry in how to basically, what are the framework within they can operate. I think this is super essential, particularly as we discuss some of the more, let's say, intelligent ways of implementing AI into our hearts. So they must ensure that what we do has a minimum harm and a maximum benefit for society. So I think there's no doubt about that. Now, that's on policy and guardrails, which is very different from telling me how I should architect a particular system. I don't think I've ever really met a politician who's super interested in the underlying technical details of an architecture. It is really more on the policy level and the guardrails. And I think that's absolutely essential that they do, because I don't think we can leave that to engineers, which still is 80% male in just out of studies. And we all know that the prefrontal cortex is not very well developed with these people. Only when you get older, it gets a little bit better. So it is absolutely essential. But you know, Andreas and I, we had a meeting with a US private equity guy or investor guy some years ago in California, and he was begging Europe to come to US with how do we actually solve some of these policy-related questions in our technical environment, and how do we comply with it? How do we come up with solutions, innovation that comply with, let's say, more strict guidelines on privacy and, let's say, minimizing the risk of the critical infrastructure. So I think politicians and policymakers must provide guidelines, and not 2 or 3 years after a thing has hit the market, preferably more or less the right time. And I think that's the biggest challenge. AI is a good example. Satellites is a good example. I mean, why do we start talking about investing into satellites now? It's pretty much already. It's not too late, never too late, but it's timing is not great, and AI is another good example. So yes, they must.
So that's a nice invitation for Thomas Jatzenbeck, that policy framework and let's say working together with policymakers also is very important for us. Well, my personal impression is looking back on the last years is that the idea of disaggregation fits very well to the idea of geopolitical de-risking. And therefore, I always had the impression that Open RAN really fits to the mindset of policymakers in Europe at this point of time. But on the other hand, that's more my personal thinking, is that geopolitical de-risking does not necessarily means disaggregation. It also means more or less to set up own capabilities in Europe in the ecosystem, which must not necessarily be fully disaggregated. But this more or less my perspective on this discussion. And now I want also to integrate Andreas to our discussion. And yeah, as you are the, let's say, father of, or one of the fathers of the i14y lab.
The grandfather.
No. Let's say. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I specifically, of course, want to know from you what role of testbeds, projects like i14y, and public investments, public fundings. What role does this play for scaling up Open RAN in Europe? This investment of the state and the support of the state.
Yeah, so let me start from a slightly different angle. So if you apply for public funding, one important question is usually, is there a market failure? So that is what usually the politicians want to hear. So why should they do some public funding, some investment in certain projects? So that's, at least in some domains, this is a key question. And I think this is something we should keep in mind. The situation in beginning of 2020, etc., so some geopolitics, in summary, there might be something like a market failure. Okay, so that was a trigger point, the first one. And the second one is, yes, if we want to, somehow it's a transformation of the industry, what we try. So Maja mentioned that. So if we want to do that, there is no company in Europe that can do that alone. That's impossible. So we must find some constructs to do it jointly and perhaps with the support of public funding. And for us, it was obvious that time, hey, yes, we disaggregate, we create these new interfaces, and there are pros and cons, but they make sense. If we want to see new players there, let's discuss later how that could happen or not. But it was obvious we need this interoperability, and we need a lab and a complex test infrastructure that costs a lot of money to run those tests. And the intention was to open it up to the public or to the ecosystem. So, and you see a couple of examples here in the round that smaller companies learned thanks to the availability of the test infrastructure, because ORAN is something you must do and nothing you can simply buy. So we discussed that yesterday. And this is, I think, one important element of cultural change also for the operators. And last point, because it's a pretty new learning from me from the events the last days. So, because we had this academic discussions around Open RAN the last 2 days. And there were one very clear statement, and this guy said, a professor from Dublin, he said, hey, thanks to Open RAN, I can work with students and train them in modern mobile wireless technology. And he is right. 10 years ago, the differentiator between a chair for communication was, do they have some old Nokia equipment or not? So, yeah. So, and the point, that was the reason why, or is one reason why Wi-Fi is flying that much, because all the students learn that in the lab. It's cost efficient, it's easy, it's open. So, and we should keep that in mind when we think about the long-term change of or transformation of the industry.
Yeah, that's the beauty of open systems.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, very, very interesting. I think that's the beauty of open systems, that you can bring a lot of people working together on the systems, doing research, having access to the open ecosystem, and not also for the academia that you are not forced to collaborate with big vendors, but you can set up a framework or an ecosystem by yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have also prepared a second round of questions, but I now spontaneously also want to take the chance to ask here in the audience if there's a specific question to our speakers today. So I have the microphone, I can do the microphone guy and can just come to you. Is there somebody who has a specific question? Yes. Dankeschön.
I have one question about network sharing. Open RAN seems to be a perfect environment to open the networks for network sharing, but this is not much discussed. Not here and not much in the policy discussion as well. And the question is why it isn't. So is it too early maybe for that? So you can share a lot of components in an Open RAN environment. Why it does not happen and also not discussed?
Well, I think maybe this question goes a little bit to Andreas from a Deutsche Telekom perspective, but
Okay.
happy to invite everybody. I also have our own answer to this.
Yeah. So because you cannot sneak out as Telefónica. So first, looking at the economics of RAN, etc. So network sharing is important. It's an important element how to make it efficient, especially in the areas with low population density, etc. There are other reasons. So in a city, there are limited space. You simply cannot find new locations for RAN sites, etc. So there is an economic pressure for sharing of resources. Keep it that way. So, and B, operators are already doing that. So in 3GPP, you can find different approaches, MOCN and other things. And even just in the transport business, there's an approach of sharing. So DT serves Telefónica, for example, with front haul, back hauling solutions. Yes, these are the first steps. And I 100% agree with your statement. We must discuss that more because, yes, with this new, more software-driven, cloudified approach, there are a lot of more options to share resources. And we never thought enough about that and never made it an exercise to define it as an input for the standardization. And by the way, that's a weak point in the standardization. We always think in very linear production models, but the reality is there are a lot of entities who contribute to this linear production model. And to think more about the business interfaces and the business meaning there, and how to make it happen with an API, for example, that would be a good point.
Yeah, so I can just add also from my perspective, I also think that sharing will be the future or a big topic in the future in telecommunication market because of two reasons. The one is the areas where we currently do not have sufficient network coverage are these areas where it is most expensive to roll out network, like for example, the line coverage alongside railway tracks or in rural areas. And their sharing from an economical perspective makes a lot of sense. And the other aspect is, or the second aspect is that it will be easier when you build it based on cloud RAN solutions. I also believe in this. And the third aspect is also that there is still a long-going economic pressure in the telecommunications market in Europe because there's not so much growth opportunities in a market where every customer has a mobile phone, and therefore the pressure on getting more efficient is very high in the market, and this also leads to stronger discussions about sharing opportunities. We have seen this more in passive infrastructure so far with building up tower companies and things like this. But in the future, we will also see a stronger discussion about sharing active technologies. And this also should be considered when you develop the future of Open RAN, I think. Okay, so we have 5 more minutes. Is there one more question from the audience? Otherwise, I also have some more questions on my list.
Okay. Just maybe quickly,
Yes,
say we have 5 more minutes. I thought we had 5 seconds left.
5 seconds? No.
I think it's a very good question to raise the run, right? I mean, if you're sharing today, you will also be sharing tomorrow, irrespective of what you have. But I think that if you go into 5G, in particular 5G standalone, there are some additional complexities in terms of slicing that makes sharing not straightforward, or at least some of the sharing models we have today might not be supported. And given O-RAN is targeting 5G, of course, if you look at just the generations, as well as 6G, I think there are also other fundamental issues that needs to be resolved before you can comfortably share in a more modern setting.
Okay, one more question.
I would like to ask you about the topic that really interests me. It means the non-terrestrial networks. So taking the radio equipment and maybe some of the core network equipment to the satellites, to space, because that can be a really game changer in that mobile networks technology. For instance, for the Himalayas and the people that the network coverage in the places that the network coverage isn't good. So I know that the specification right now just started to happen about these non-terrestrial networks, also in the O-RAN area. So 2 questions. First, what is the expectation for the future? When it will be available for us, I mean for the users, to use? And the second is, do you already discuss it with the manufacturers, that technology of the non-terrestrial radio, for instance? Thank you.
Very good question with a lot of interesting aspects, from technology to spectrum policy to coverage targets you have for different areas. So you can discuss about this even for a whole standalone panel, but Maja, I think this is also one element of the future vision for the development of Open RAN, to integrate also satellite connectivity. So therefore, I want to hand over the question to you.
Thank you. Well, a very interesting question. We are not putting a large focus on it, but as we can always see topic development by members who want to join or potential members, that's increasing. Academics are increasing this topic, or suppliers who are looking into that, or academics who are looking into that are more asking to join the ON Alliance. So certainly a very important topic. But I would say 95% right now of the work we are doing for the next and for the release trains, it's really more not yet there, but certainly coming.
One more aspect from your side regarding the relationship between satellite and mobile connectivity, or?
Yeah, okay. So
that's always a difficult thing for telecom operators.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
somehow
challenging
difficult. But technically, it's obvious. So it's a technology that helps to close the white spots, even in Europe. It might be a good technology for getting higher resilience, backup capacities in case of failure of the terrestrial networks. That's a point. And there are already trials and activities and projects. I think that even DT made some press release about it. So I can't remember right now, but there are activities, sure.
So I'm a board member in Greenlandic incumbent Telecom, and Greenland is about 55,000 people there. 50,000 live in the capital, and the rest is spread along the west coast in small settlements, typically with, say, 100 to from 10 households to 100 households, but really spread. There's no road infrastructure. You have to sail, you have to fly. And we use satellites several places for connecting our local mobile network back to our central in Nuuk. And it works, it provides service, but it is certainly not as robust as you would be used to in a terrestrial-based network. And there are latency requirements that is difficult to meet, even for a low Earth satellite, again, depending on where do you take the signal down. In our case, we take it down in Spain. Then we have subsea cables going to Copenhagen and then back to Greenland. So you can imagine that even if it's a low Earth, the latency is... So there are certain applications simply not built for that kind of latency. So I agree with Andreas that in order to create availability and robustness of your network, I think it's a super interesting alternative. If you are in a situation where your country infrastructure has been smashed or destroyed in a conflict situation or natural disaster, having the capability of getting base stations still to work in a more autonomous way than what they normally would do, I think satellite is probably one of the only solutions to it for that. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, very good. I see that we are still waiting for our guests from the political arena, and therefore we just will continue our short discussion. And the good thing is there's one more question, so I can still wait to come back to my moderation cards. So I want to integrate your question also.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Ian Ginn, here with Brown IPOS, observer of the industry and an active participant as well. I've heard from, I think it was Kim was saying, start with disaggregation. So I think we started disaggregation because we could, but I still think we're answering the question that needs to be answered as to should we, if you see what I mean. I think that's where we still are. But the other thing I think in the telecom industry we just often miss is the customer. So at the end of the day, it has to be driven by a customer. It has to be someone that has a need. Now, it can either be the operators. We all know that operators struggle with operational costs or development cycles, or do we mean the end customer? I think in 6G we're thinking about sensing, and also maybe the intersection between Wi-Fi, which was mentioned briefly, and small cells, that sort of area where this could actually fly. So, yeah, as I say, who's the customer and why are they going to buy it?
Okay, coming from satellite connectivity to small cells now. Yeah. What do you think is the future of a fully integrated system between small cells, macro cells, and hyper macro cells from the satellite connectivity? Do we have a vision for this in the future?
So wasn't the first question about disaggregation? So can we take that first?
Yeah, for sure.
No, sorry.
That's why we feel comfortable. not the customer, but the technical question.
Okay, sorry. Now you convinced me. So yesterday I showed one graph about traffic distribution in DT's network. So also as a reminder, we very often talk about RAN. We focus a lot on RAN. But looking at the overall numbers, and I'm pretty sure it's not that different in Telefónica. So all the operators that operate fixed line business and the wireless business may see the same numbers. So it is 90% traffic, aggregated traffic. Peak load comes from the fixed line, and it's 10% that comes from the wireless, from the cellular network. And if you look at the numbers of the wireless network, most of the traffic is generated and consumed indoor. Yeah. So looking from the design perspective or the architecture, it may make sense to think more about how to build the perfect indoor network. And that is perhaps a link to the question about the heterogeneous networks, small cells, etc. So looking at the market, I think this idea is flying around quite a while. So all the studies dealing with more integration or with small cells, femtocells, whatever, most of them showed that there is absolutely no economic reason to get out of the Wi-Fi solution that we have so far. So that's the economic reality. And the beauty that we may get from seamless handover and all those things is not convincing enough for a customer to pay more. Sorry.
Very good. So I think now we are coming to an end of our discussion with this, let's say, last sentence about the market reality when you sell connectivity products. So thank you very much for this little discussion round. And now I think I will hand over to Marina, who then welcomes our political guest here on stage. So thank you for joining the session and enjoy the day here.